Hello everyone, and welcome to my third of 3 videos on this, the Nikon D80. In the first video we talked about what everything it is. In the second video we went over most every function. And in this video we're gonna go into the menu and we're gonna do everything in the menus. So if you are looking for a specific menu function, these tabs here on the right side, I will put a link in the video description to each of these tabs so that you can go to a specific tab and get closer to what you need to know. In addition, the custom functions, I'll put a link for each of those in the video's description so you can go straight there. The way to navigate this menu system is with the crosspad. You will, when you enter the menu, it's going to take you back to where you had been. If you had been, so you can move between the tabs and the items by using left and right, and then you can scroll between the tabs by moving up and down. When you're in the items, you use up and down to select between them, and then you use the right keypad to enter an item, and then the left keypad to back out of it, okay? The menus are the playback menu, shooting menu, custom settings menu, setup menu, retouch menu, and then back to playback, okay? So we're going to go through all of these items and talk about what all of them do. In the playback menu, these items really only apply if you have memory photos saved on your memory card and if you're going to play back things. So delete allows you to delete individual photos, folders, the entire memory card if you wanted to do that. Playback folder allows you to select a folder on your memory card to play back images from. So let's say that you've done 2 or 3 photo shoots in the last week for different clients, and you want to go and you have a different folder for each client. And you're meeting with one of them this evening. You can select just that client's photos to scroll through to show them their images. Rotate Tall is on or off. With Rotate Tall, if you have a portrait orientation photo and it's set to on, you will have it oriented this way with black letterboxing on the sides. With off, your portrait orientation photo would take up the whole LCD, but you'd have to turn the camera to see it properly. Slideshow will start a slideshow playback. Hide images will hide images from playback, and print set, if you connect your camera to a printer, will let you select some options for printing from your camera. This is something I've never done in my life. I'm not the person to ask about how to print from a camera. Basically, anytime I take a photo, I'm going to do some level of editing on it, even if it's just some slider adjustments in RAW. And so I'm going to print the final photos that have been cleaned up. I'm never going to print something straight out of camera. I also don't recommend printing things straight out of camera because you'll get dust spots and things like that show up. The next menu is called the shooting menu. Now, if you want to follow along with some of these items and read about them, the manual has the shooting menu on page 79. The first one here that we're going to talk about is Optimize Image. Okay, so we're going to go in here, and these are different color spaces that you can apply to images. And they're normal, softer, vivid, more vivid, portrait, custom, black and white. That should be all of them. Yeah. Honestly, if you make changes here, you're never going to get back to normal. Keep it in normal. Make your edits in post. If you're here to become a better photographer and learn how to edit photos and create better images, don't set yourself up to have a harder time editing by picking one of these. Leave it with normal. You can, in any free video editor now in 2024 and going forward, can do all of this stuff better than these in-camera algorithms that are approaching 20 years old can do. Next is image quality. We saw this when we hit the quality button. These are the exact same options. RAW, JPEG Fine, Normal, or Basic, RAW plus JPEG Fine, Normal, or Basic, and then back up to here. So, as I said when we talked about this in the second video, just keep it on RAW and edit your photos in your RAW workflow, and you will get the most out of your images. Image size allows you to, if you're using JPEGs, allows you to adjust. Would help if I hit OK there. Would allow you, when you're shooting JPEGs, to change the size of the JPEGs. Large is your full sensor, medium is a 5.6 megapixel image, and small is a 2.5 megapixel image. White balance is exactly what we saw here when we hit the white balance button. You can scroll through and go to all of the different white balances. If you're interested in what all of these do and how to make fine adjustments on them in video 2, there's a link in that video's description to the white balance discussion. So pause this, open up video 2 in a separate tab, and take a look at that, and you can then see all of those different white balance options. Now, If we come in here and select pre, this is where we can create our white balance photo. So you can take a measurement, you can use an existing photo that you have taken of a white card or a white backdrop on your studio, in your studio rather, or on your tabletop studio, and use your preset white balance. ISO sensitivity, exact same thing as we talked about in video 2 with this ISO button. Auto, I'm not sure why it's turned off. Well, I keep having this issue with the old Nikons. I can't figure out how to turn on auto ISO. Anyway, you can pick any of the specific ISOs here. With a camera of this age, which is from 2006, I strongly recommend keeping it under about 250 to 320 at most. The digital noise beyond 320 is pretty much going to limit you to black and white photography. Old sensors, even CCD sensors, which were really much better than CMOS back in the day. I think this had a CCD sensor anyway. They still struggle with high ISO. Long exposure noise reduction and high ISO noise reduction will apply noise reducing algorithms to your images when you are either taking a long exposure, I don't know what the definition of long exposure is for this camera, or a high ISO. And again, I think high ISO might be anything higher than 400. And I leave these off. I think with long exposure that this camera will take a second photo of the same duration and then compare the noise between the two of them to cancel out the noise, which is a good way of doing it, but it means taking a second photo. High ISO, it's algorithms that it's going to apply. Realistically, a free noise reducing software today in 2024 and anytime going forward, I'm certain, will do a better job at reducing noise than the algorithms in this camera, which are approaching 20 years old right now. So this is going to be kind of a recurring theme here. With any of these image adjustment functions that this camera has, this is an 18-year-old camera as of this video's recording. There has been a lot of technological progress in that time. This camera is very obsolete in these regards, and you will get better results not doing this stuff in camera. Next up, we have multiple exposures, which will allow you to create multiple exposures. I'm not sure why that's blanked out. It shouldn't be, but let's see. This option is not activated with current settings, but it doesn't tell me which one. So I'm not quite sure how to get that to turn on and what it's not liking, but at any rate, with multiple exposures, you can come in here, and I believe it allows you to create multiple exposures in camera. Going through, I don't think you can combine multiple images that are already taken. I think it will let you go in and create multiple photos as you're taking them. And then we're back up to the top for optimize image, and that's everything in the shooting menu. Our next menu item is the custom setting menu. And as I said at the very beginning, each one of these items, 01 through 32, oh my gosh, is going to have its own link in the video description if you just want to set a specific one of these. We're going to start up here with the reset, which will allow you to reset all of your custom settings. I've configured these, so I really don't want to do that right now. You're just going to have to trust me that that's what it does. Custom setting 1 is your beep, on or off. Beep confirmation, if you need the audio cue that the camera is going to count down your time, that will beep when your timer's counting down, autofocus confirmation, things like that, turn it to on. If it's off, your camera will be silent. Matter of personal preference and how much you want to annoy the people around you. Custom setting number 2 is autofocus area mode, and there are 3 different modes. Single area autofocus uses a single autofocus point that you can of course set to have your entire focus selection be based on that autofocus point. Dynamic area uses a single autofocus point and then the autofocus points around it to select what is going to be in focus. And auto area autofocus will automatically pick the best autofocus points for your setting based on what the camera sees and what it thinks you need. Matter of personal preference here and your shooting setting, what type of autofocus you want to use. Single area is good for specifying the focus point in your image, as well, and then aligning your image to what you want to have be in that area for having it be in focus. Also very good for stationary subjects. Dynamic area tends to be a little bit better for moving subjects that move in and out of that focus area because the camera will track it. Auto area can sometimes get a little bit jumbled if you have moving subjects because the camera might not know which one you want to have be in focus. Next up, we have center autofocus area, normal or wide. This is how large of the center autofocus area you want. Do you want it just to be this normal center zone or an extended larger center zone? Again, matter of personal preference and how, whether you're tracking something that might move in and out of a larger center zone or be relatively centered within that normal zone. Custom function number 4 is your AF assist, on or off. This is the light that's on the front of your camera. In dim settings, do you want that to turn on or do you want it to stay off? Matter of personal preference and the rules of where you're photographing. If you're in a museum or at your kids' play, you might want to set that off to prevent your autofocus light from being distracting to other people. No memory card, on, OK or lock. So this basically is, if you don't have a memory card, your camera will pretend to take a photo. If you don't have a memory card, the camera will not take a photo. So this is really good if you want to do a quick check when you pick up your camera to make sure that it has an SD card in it. Set it to lock, push the shutter button. If the camera doesn't take a photo, then you don't have a memory card in there and you need to grab one. Custom setting number 5 is your image review. I'm not sure why it's blanked out on this, but what you can do here is go into your image review and set how long you want to see an image after you've taken it. This might be blanked out because a later one might turn this on or off. No, I'm not sure why that's grayed out. Anyway, custom setting menu number 7 is your ISO Auto, on or off. This is why it was grayed out, because you have to come in here and turn it on. So if you want to use Auto ISO, turn it on. If you don't want to use Auto ISO, turn it off. Matter of personal preference in what you're shooting. If you're a street photographer, Auto ISO can be very useful. What you would want to do is turn it to on, have manual settings for your aperture and shutter speed, and then let the ISO be what the camera controls to adjust your exposure. So you can also do that if you're a journalist or something like that. It's a good way to make sure that you have a consistent shutter speed, which could be very fast if you want to make sure that you freeze motion, and a consistent aperture, and then just don't worry about what the exact ISO setting is, especially if you're going to shoot this to convert to black and white. Grid display on or off. In the viewfinder, do you want to have a framing grid visible or not? Matter of personal preference. I like having a grid display because it helps make sure that your verticals are vertical and your horizontals are horizontal, and also generally that you can put key points on key parts of the grid, the key points of your image, and have pleasing composition. So, but again, matter of personal preference. Custom function number 9 is your viewfinder warning, on or off. If you do not have an SD card in the camera, the viewfinder will blink an SD card symbol on the viewfinder matte screen in the lower left corner to indicate that you need to put a memory card in your camera. Having it on is a good way to look through the viewfinder and make sure that you have a memory card. I think that's a good option. Custom function number 10 is EV steps, 1/3 or 1/2. If you're shooting RAW, this isn't a huge deal. It's not you have editability beyond 1/3 or 1/2 of a stop. If you're shooting JPEG, I definitely recommend 1/3 of a stop because you'll get more accurate exposures. So, what is a stop? 100 to 200 ISO is a single stop. 1/3 means that your ISO settings go 100, 125, 160, 200. 1/2 would be 100, 150, 200. 1/125th to 1/60th is a full stop. 1/125th, 1/100th, 1/80th, 1/60th, or 1/125th, 1/90th, 1/60th. Okay. F5.6 to F8 is a full stop. F5.6, 6.3, 7.1, 8. F5.6, usually I think it's like 6.8 and then 8, something like that. So at any rate, it's a matter of how much control you want to have over the specific of your exposure. Do you want to have it be in a 1/3 or a 1/2 stop? Really, functionally a matter of personal preference. Custom function 11 is exposure compensation, on or off. And the way that this works is with off. If you're going to do exposure value compensation, you have to do it like I showed you in the second video, using the exposure value compensation button on top of the camera. With on, if you can use the command wheels for exposure value compensation. So if you are only ever going to shoot in program mode, you are never going to leave that. You could set this to on and then use the command wheels to intentionally over or underexpose your images instead of using the EV compensation button. If you're going to shoot modes other than program mode, it's a good idea to leave this to off. So, matter of shooting style and as to which one you want to use for that. Custom function number 12 is your center weighted metering size. If you remember from the second video, I said I would show you how to change that. This is this setting. 6, 8, or 10 millimeters. Basically, do you want a small center weighted dot, medium center weighted dot, or larger center weighted dot? As far as I understand it, the balance of the meter reading stays the same. So with the smallest one, you get a more concentrated meter reading. With the larger one, you get a more diffuse meter reading. If you just want to use center weighted for street photography or general shooting, you might want to set it at 10 because you'll get more balanced exposures. But if you want to use center weighted for portraits, then you might want to set it at 6 because you'll get a more accurate reading off of your portrait subject's face. So matter of personal preference here, shooting style, what you're going to be shooting as to which one you select. If you're curious about which one of these will work best for your shooting style, just practice with them. See how they do. See how it affects your shooting style and your images. Custom function number 13 is auto bracketing set. Your options are AE and flash, AE only, or flash. Now, if you remember from the second video when we talked about bracketing here, and I said in certain modes like program, bracketing could be your shutter speed and aperture, or your flash, or your ISO. So with this allows you to determine that. Currently, this camera is set up so that in program mode, bracketing would only be allowed to adjust aperture and shutter speed. If I go up here, if I'm going to be doing a lot of flash work in a studio setting, I could have it so that the program mode will use aperture, shutter speed, and flash power to affect bracketing. I'm going to be down here and I don't want to have a different shutter speed or aperture. I just want to have flash power be used for bracketing. I can do that too. So it's a matter of need which one of these you want to select. The last option is white balance, probably grayed out because I'm using raw, but I could be wrong about that. But white balance bracketing, if you turn this on, would have the white balance, the different white balances bracket in the images, or different powers within the white balance bracket. So I think it's different powers now that I think about it. So that if you're shooting under, like, let's say a tungsten light, and you don't know what setting to use, how much power, what to use for tungsten light, you could set your white balance to tungsten, select white balance bracketing, and then it would be minimal, normal, strong, and you could look at your images and see which setting to customize your white balance to. I believe, if I remember correctly, that is how that one works. Anyway. Custom function 14 is auto bracketing order. This is a matter of personal preference. The default order is normal, under, over, or you could also do under, normal, over. However you want to see this in your photo roll, it's up to you. I like under, normal, over. It just makes the bracketing sequence photos stand out a little bit more clearly to me when I'm reviewing them on my computer. Custom function 15 is your command dials. Default or reverse. Do you want your command dials to work normally or backwards? Matter of personal preference and what you want out of your command dial interface. Item 16, function button. So when we talked about the function button in video 2, and I said, well, in the menu video, we'll talk about what the different functions are. Here we are. This is that point. Okay. If you push the function button, what do you want it to do? Bring up your ISO display so you can adjust your ISO, which I think is kind of weird because you can do that right here. Turn your framing grid on or off in your viewfinder. That's kind of a clever use. You could do that if you find the framing grid distracting, but at the same time, you want to be able to turn it on just to make sure your framing and composition are good from time to time. Autofocus area mode, you can use the function button to change your autofocus area mode as you see fit. Center autofocus area. Push the function button so that if you have manually selected an autofocus point, it goes back to the center. Flash value lock. Push the function button down and it will lock your flash value. So if you're bracketing, for instance, you could lock your flash value and your bracketing won't adjust your flash power. Or if you're using TTL metering for your flash, you can lock in your flash power so that the flash won't change powers with different metering, different meter readings. Flash off. Use the function button to disable your flash. Go into flash off mode so that if you're in a museum and you want to make sure that you're in green auto mode, which can automatically pop up and fire the flash if you want, you can use this to turn off your flash so that you don't accidentally trigger a flash when you're taking a picture of a 300-year-old painting and get, beaten with a security guard's baton for that. Matrix metering. You can go back to matrix metering from center weighted or spot. Center weighted, you can go to center weighted metering from matrix or spot, and spot, you can go to spot from matrix or center weighted. Okay, so these are the different things you can assign to the function button. Really just a matter of personal preference and what you want to have your function button do when you're taking photos. Custom function 17 is your LCD illumination. Do you want the LCD in your viewfinder to be on or off? If you want it off so that you have a less distracting viewfinder, go for it. If you want the information that it provides that we saw in video 2, go for it. Custom function 18, my favorite custom function. All right, when we talked in video 2 about the AEL AFL button up here being in video 3, it's time to talk about that. So here are the different options that you have with the AEL AFL button and what it will do with this camera. So this first one up here, AEAF. AE stands for auto exposure, your shutter speed and aperture. AF stands for autofocus, the focus point. With option 1, this is a toggle switch, like a light switch. Push it once, turn it on, push it a second time, turn it off, and it locks both exposure and focus settings, your aperture and shutter speed and your focus point. Option 2, again a toggle switch, locks only your exposure settings. Option 3 locks your autofocus point. Option 4 is the exact same thing as option 2, but you have to hold this down the entire time. It's not a toggle switch. Option 5 makes this function like the AF on button that many of the film cameras from Nikon had, which turns on and off your autofocus function. Option, what's that? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Option 6 is your flash value lock. This, when we talked about this in the custom function button, locks your flash power value. Focus area selection, you can use this button as your autofocus button. Now, interestingly about this camera, there's no autofocus selection button by default on it, is there? Yeah, there's not. Which means if you want to be able to switch between autofocus points, I think this is the only way to do it. Now, one of the weird things about this is I know how this is supposed to work. It's supposed to, I should say, I think I know how this is supposed to work. It should be that when you push this, you can then select a specific autofocus point. And nothing happens when I push this in this mode. Honestly, makes me wonder if this button might just be faulty on this camera. I'm not sure, because these modes are ones that I really don't use for still shooting very often. So at any rate, as I understand it, the way that this is supposed to work is it allows you to select a focus area by pushing this down and either adjusting the command wheel, the cross pad, or the command wheels. Nothing happens when I do that with this camera. Auto area, AE lock, AF lock, and AF area. So basically with this, it locks your autofocus area, autofocus point, and exposure settings. Auto exposure lock and autofocus area, what this does is this locks your exposure settings and the autofocus area, which, as I understand the way that this works, will allow a subject that is within that autofocus area to move around a little bit and have focus track within that area. Auto exposure lock, autofocus and area lock rather. This will lock your focus point and the area that is being used when you press this button. And autofocus on with autofocus area will turn on and off your autofocus and I believe that means that it will also allow you to select and change your autofocus area. There are so many options in this. Realistically, some of these I don't recall seeing on other Nikon cameras. I feel like they were kind of dropped. But some of these up here from AF on and upward can be very useful. And which one you select is really just a matter of your personal preference. I usually leave this on 2. I like the toggle switch function for your exposure lock with this. But again, whatever works best for you, select that one. Custom function 19 is your auto exposure lock on or off. With custom function 19, if you set this to off, your auto exposure, your AEL AFL button is the only button on the camera that will trigger your auto exposure lock and autofocus lock. If you set this to on, your shutter button will also do that. When you have to press the shutter, that is. Okay. So that's the difference between those two. Matter of personal preference, do you want the shutter button to perform exposure and focus lock or not? Custom function number 20 is your focus area, no wrap or wrap. Basically, when you're scrolling through your focus areas, do you want to go all the way to one side and be stuck there no matter how many times you push the button? Or do you want it to wrap so that when you get to this side, you can easily get to the focus point on the other side? Totally a matter of personal preference and how you want your camera to behave. Custom function 21, autofocus area illumination, on, off, or auto. Do you want the focus area and focus points to be indicated in your viewfinder, yes or no? Or automatically when the camera thinks you need to know? Just a matter of personal preference and how you want your camera to give you information. Custom function 22, built-in flash metering mode. Through the lens, manual, repeating flash, or command mode. So TTL is going to take a meter reading through the lens, use the camera's light meter to determine the flash setting that's needed based on your aperture, shutter speed, ISO, and available lighting. Manual, you're going to have complete control over how the flash behaves, the amount of power that it puts out, and if an image with a flash is too bright or too dark, it's your fault. Repeating flash. What is repeating flash? This is a new one. Oh, interesting. So and then the last one is command mode, allows you to take control over different Nikon flashes with this camera, up to 2 different groups, your built-in flash. I am not a fancy flash setup kind of guy. I'm not the person to explain to you how these are all going to work. If you have Nikon flashes, I would imagine the manuals will tell you how to do this. I'm pretty sure this is only going to work with Nikon flashes. I'm not sure that this works with any of the third parties, but I could be wrong on that. So I only do flash work with Pentaxes. I don't know how to do complicated flash setups with Nikons. So we're just going to switch this back to TTL. For most people, that's probably the most useful setting. If you are really into flash use, those other settings will be things that you can use to set up your flash. Flash warning is going to be on or off, and basically what this means with on, a flash symbol in the viewfinder up here will blink if the camera is going to fire the flash. Custom function 24, flash shutter speed. Basically what this is going to do is this sets the slowest shutter speed at which the flash will fire. So if you want to have your slow sync shutter be as long as 30 seconds, you can do that. If you want to make sure that your slow sync flash or rear curtain slow sync flash is limited to 1 second, you can do that here. So that's basically just a matter of personal preference, use, and how long you want your shutter times to be with your longer flash speeds. Custom function number 25 is your Auto FP. Basically, what this does is this, if you set this to on, oh dang it, if you set this to on, that turns on what we call high-speed sync with select Nikon flashes. I don't think this works with anything third-party, and I don't think this works with a Nikon flash that is not HSS compatible, but this right here, Auto FP, is your HSS sync option. Custom function 26 is your modeling flash, on or off. Basically, with the modeling flash set to off, it doesn't do anything. With it set to on, with select Nikon flashes, a modeling flash will fire when you press the depth of field preview button, and that basically will, I think, do a preview so you can see how the flash is going to look when the photo is taken. So, matter of personal preference and whether or not you have a modeling flash in your setup, quite frankly. Option 27, monitor off time, is how long from when you hit the menu button do you want to go, or the play button actually as well, do you want the monitor to stay on until it automatically turns off. This is just a matter of battery preservation. Given that these videos take a long time, I always set it to 10 minutes, but if you're not going to be using your monitor and you want to really stretch your battery, you can set this to 5 seconds. Okay. Custom function number 28, auto meter off. How long do you want your light meter to stay active after you have to press your shutter button right up here? Anywhere from 4 seconds to 30 minutes. Just a matter of personal preference and how long you want to have your light meter stay on. I usually go with 16 seconds, and I find that to be a comfortable amount of time. Custom function 29, self-timer. How long do you want your self-timer delay to be? 2, 5, 10, or 20 seconds. Just a matter of personal preference and how long you want to have that timer count down for. Custom function 30, remote on duration. How long do you want this to wait for a remote control trigger to be fired? 1 minute to 15 minutes in these increments. Basically, this will automatically turn off the remote control function after that duration. Custom function 31, exposure delay mode. Okay, this is kind of a weird one. What this does is this is like mirror lockup, if you're familiar with that term. When you turn this to on, well, let's start with off. When you turn this to off and you press the shutter button, the camera will take a photo right away. If you set this to on, the first time you press a shutter button, the mirror inside of it will flip up. It will not take a photo. The second time you press the shutter button, it will take a photo. So you can use this with self-timer, with a remote control, and what that will allow you to do is put this on a tripod, take an extreme macro photo, a star trails, a waterfall, whatever. The mirror will flip up, and then all of the camera shake will have a few seconds to get out of the system, out of the tripod, the camera. You can use a remote control or the self-timer to give yourself some time to, after you press the shutter button, allow the motion to work its way out of the system as well, and have a nice, motion-free macro star trails waterfall photo. But for normal shooting, just leave that to off. Otherwise, you'll have to hit the shutter button twice every time you use this. You take a picture. And custom function 32 is MB-D80 batteries. Basically, you can tell it what type of battery you're using. LR6 is like the standard battery, or there's HR6, FR6. Honestly, I have no idea what those are. I think they have to do with battery packs or different types of batteries. If you're using just a standard third-party battery like I am, I think it's just LR6. I have it set to LR6 and the camera's working just fine. So, yeah, you can tell the camera what kind of battery you have. And that's it for the custom settings menu. Next up, we're going to go into the setup menu. The setup menu has a bunch of different options that will help you set up the camera. So the CSM setup menu, you can choose between simple, full, and my menu. Simple will trim down what's in this menu to be fewer things. It might also affect, does not appear to affect the other menus. Okay. This will simple will remove some of the items in here. My menu will allow you to select specific items, specific tabs to display. So you can come in here and you can uncheck or check specific items. If you know for a fact, let's say, that you're never going to show a slideshow on this camera, you can uncheck it, and then it won't even display in the standard menu. Okay. Well, when you are selected to my menu, it won't display. But what we're going to do is we're going to use the full menu for this one because I want to show you everything in it. But that's what this one does. This item here allows you to eliminate line by line specific items or go to a simpler set of items so that you don't have all of this stuff cluttering up your menu screen. Format memory card. By the way, as we go through this one, if you want to follow along with it in the manual, it starts on page 101. Format memory card allows you to format the memory card. It will erase every photo on it. World time lets you pick your time zone, the date format, and whether or not it's daylight savings time for those of us in the US. So you can make those settings adjustments here. LCD brightness allows you to increase or decrease the LCD brightness. Good for indoor spaces like plays, so you don't disturb the people around you. Or +2 is really good for outside shooting. Video mode, NTSC or PAL. Wait a second, I said in the first video that this camera can't record video, and it can't. This is for your analog playback. When you plug this into an old analog television, is it an NTSC television or a PAL television? This is just dependent on where you are in the world. This is not a video recording setting, it's a video output setting. Language, set to English, but you have all of these different languages that you can choose from depending on what language you are fluent in and want to use. Or if you get your hands on your friend's camera and want to change the language on them, this is how you do that. USB has to do with your USB mini port over here on the side. Do you want it to function as a mass storage port or an MTP PTP port? Honestly, really don't even recommend hooking this up to a computer for the very simple fact that if you want to transfer your files from this to your computer, it's going to be a lot faster just to pull out the SD card, put it into an SD card reader in your computer's USB port, and transfer files that way. Mini USB 1 ports are not fast, so this setting really doesn't matter if you are going to just use your SD card for file transfer. Image comments are off, input, or attach. This allows you to go through and attach comments to images. I really don't recommend using this. It's very time consuming because you don't have a keypad on this camera. You get a keypad on the screen and you have to select each letter one at a time and then click OK when you select them. It's very time consuming. I mean, I guess this would have a value for select uses, but most of the time I would say this is just something to ignore. Folders, it's not going to let me go in here, but you can manage your folders, create new, rename, things like that in this setting, and that will only work if you have an SD card in the camera, which I currently don't. So if you wanted to, let's say you had 3 shoots coming up in the next week, and you had your SD card and you wanted to create 3 folders, one for each of the different clients. You could do that and then have your images saved to each of those folders so that you could sort them more easily when you upload them to your computer. File numbering sequence, on, off, or reset. Off means that every folder you will go back to 000. On means that your sequence will keep going from 0000 to 9999 or whatever the specific numbers are until it resets there. And reset is manual reset. I recommend leaving this to on because if you take all of your photos and you dump them into one folder on your computer, it's going to take a lot more time to get up to the point where they start repeating with on than it will with off. And this camera's SD card can hold 2,500 RAW files. If you're shooting RAW, this right here will guarantee that you don't accidentally overwrite any files when you get back to your computer. Mirror lockup will be mirror lockup for cleaning in this mode. And this, I believe, only works if you have the AC adapter and you have the camera plugged into a wall with the AC adapter. Dust off reference photo will take a reference photo if you have an SD card in your camera so that the camera can find sensor dust, and then it will clone out that sensor dust for you while you're taking photos. Battery info is going to give you your battery information here. And battery meter, yeah, I have 35% remaining. I have, what's that, PIC meter? Not sure what that means. Charge life is, this is an old battery. Holy cow. Okay, so we don't have much time left on this video. Firmware version is what version of firmware you have, and to the best of my knowledge, 110 for A and 111 for B are the final versions. 111A is supposed to be the final version. Interesting. Could have sworn it was only 110. Anyway, as of when I wrote this video script at the beginning of 2023, these were still available online, and there's a link in the video's description. So if you have older versions than this, you can upgrade to the final firmware versions. Auto image rotation, are we back to the top? No, we're not. Auto image rotation is, do you want your images to rotate on your screen when you play them back and on your computer monitor so that portrait images are oriented upright? That's all. That's what this function does. Matter of personal preference and how you want your images to display. Now we're back to the top of the custom menu. We'll go down here to the retouch menu, and these are all different things you can do if you have images on your SD card. I'm just going to tell you right now, don't bother with any of them. These are sort of like, some of them are functional, but most of them are a little bit gimmicky, and quite frankly, the software in this approaching 20 years old. You've heard me say this before. Any free software you can get for photo editing will do a better job than anything built into this camera, and it will be more user-friendly for you. So the retouch menu, just ignore and do all of your editing at home on your computer. But if you would like to learn more about what all of the retouch menu items do, manual page 109 has that. And with that, we have completely finished our video series on the Nikon D80. Hey everyone, if that video was helpful, check out this other video that might be helpful too.